My name is Rex Hansen. I'm joined with Jennifer Neary. I'm the lead product engineer for Microsoft SDKs at Esri. Jennifer is a very talented rockstar developer, actually, for all Microsoft SDKs at this point. So she's going to be running one of the in-depth demos a little bit later in the session here and walking through the code. So for the next hour, we're going to talk about building or developing mapping applications for the Windows Phone SDK. A couple things we're going to cover on here is in the introduction is just basically the platform, the Windows Phone platform, and the product, in this case, the runtime SDK for Windows Phone. Just sort of a brief kind of getting started here on where you can go. There's really not an intro or a what's new, but we're going to wrap in parts of those to this session, since we're talking about building a mapping application. Just getting started. Walk through a couple of demos, show you some of the new technology that we've worked on and some of that functionality, and then we'll touch on road ahead at the very end. Now, first thing I want to talk about is Microsoft's Windows Phone platform. So Windows Phone 8 released last October. Devices have been rolling onto the market. I got some nice devices from obviously Nokia and HTC, Samsung. Loads of new capabilities, enabling you to work more effectively with the device and device capabilities, device functionality. One of the pivotal pieces there is the ability to work with native code, right? And that's going to factor in here shortly when I talk about our support for the core runtime, the common runtime amongst all of our runtime SDKs. One of the other capabilities is the Enterprise, support for the Enterprise. Windows Phone has an Enterprise story. It's a great Enterprise story for being able to take your apps that are available internally, or available to your enterprise, and be able to distribute those and make those available for folks just within your company, just within your agency, your organization. Prior to this story, basically there was a variety of different states. You had two different options. You could sideload an app, which means you had a developer unlock all your apps, or two, you could go to the Windows Phone store, which used to be called the Marketplace, and expose your apps in a variety of ways, such as through a beta or a private. Generally it's public, and then you had to educate someone, if it was public, that they needed something else actually to use the app. So in this case, the Enterprise story for Windows Phone 8 is solid. And there's actually a demo theater that I'm going to be running tomorrow afternoon that talks about, it's a 30-minute demo theater that talks about deploying your Windows Phone apps. And I'm going to actually demo some of the unmanaged capabilities with Enterprise deployments with Windows Phone 8. Obviously, Windows Phone 7 is still live. You can still go to any provider today and get a Windows Phone 7 device for cheap. The latest update to Windows Phone 7 is 7.8. Really, the bottom line for that update is the style. It gives you a new start screen that enables you to organize your tiles more similar to what Windows Phone 8 does. Right? Generally, that's the enhancement. There's a lot of folks out there that still use Windows Phone 7. It's cheaper. Generally, folks who've been on contract, they're going to be on contract for 2 years. So if they got a Windows Phone 7 device in September, then they've got another year and a half to look forward to using that or trading up at some point, right? So they're going to be around for a bit. The Windows Phone Store used to be the Windows Phone Marketplace. 150,000 plus apps at this point. So it's not near the, nearly a million apps actually in the App Store, 700, 800,000 for Android, whatever it happens to be. But the apps that happen to be there are actually turning out to be quite quality apps. We just had a release, an example last week of Pandora, right, which has been on a variety of platforms. Even your, FiOS, a Verizon box, you could get Pandora, but you couldn't get it on your Windows Phone. Well, finally, they released last week, and it's one of the best sort of Metro-style apps I've seen to date. And so there's different providers that have released Windows Phone 8 apps. And we're being able to see that. We're seeing those roll out now with the new platform and its capabilities and being able to take advantage of those. There's another concept here, and that's embedded handheld. Now, embedded handheld, the discussion on embedded handheld has circulated around essentially ruggedized devices and being able to work with embedded devices in vehicles, sort of ruggedized, high-precision GPS devices, something like Trimble might create. And prior to this, it's been using Windows Mobile at this point. They continue to use Windows Mobile for most of those devices or to develop embedded systems. Embedded handheld, the ability to work with a mobile ruggedized system, such as devices that are used, let's say, like Home Depot, Lowe's, a variety of different car rental agencies, something that they use out in the field that's designed specifically for a line of business. The embedded handheld, the SDK, that was announced in January, is going to be built on Windows Phone 8. Right? And so that's a whole new ecosystem of apps that are going to be built in an embedded format on the Windows Phone 8 platform. Now, the embedded handheld SDK hasn't been released yet, as far as I'm aware. But when it does get released, sometime soon, later this year, it's going to open up a whole new world to be able to work with Windows Phone 8 and different devices, basically line of business apps. So a couple things to think about there as far as the platform is concerned. As far as the runtime SDK for Windows Phone is concerned, we considered a powerful web mapping API. Thus far, the first release we had was December 2010. And that was 2.1. And we've had numerous releases after that to keep up with the capabilities of ArcGIS Server and online and the services there. We just transitioned to a new versioning structure last year. This January, when we changed from 2 and 3.0 to 10.1.1. Right. So our 10.1.1 release was our last release in January. And that's designed to showcase the fact that we're part of a runtime SDK, a runtime family. Right? And we saw this morning in the plenary. Ewan talked about how we have a set of runtime SDKs, right, whether it's desktop or mobile. And Windows Phone fits within our mobile family. Now, the API itself includes a map control, centers on a map control with full touch and gesture support, so you can work with, out of the box, that map. You can pinch and zoom and tap. There's also events that you can work with to capture when those occur and those different types of actions that occur, so you can work with those. Obviously, the API itself is designed to integrate within Microsoft's development environments that promote the use of the Windows Phone SDK. We'll cover some of those requirements here in an upcoming slide. And it's a free download. So right now it's free. You can go out, you can download with it, you can develop with it, you can publish as many free apps as you want to. As soon as you generate revenue, then you have to contact us. Right? So you have to talk to us, and we have a little questionnaire to fill out, and then we can talk about what the price should be. So who's built apps? Right? So this has been out for just over 2 years. We've had a variety of different folks building apps. This is just a sample of apps that are out in the Windows Phone store today that have been built using the API. If you have an app that's not in this list, let me know. I'd like to add it. I'd like to see it. It'd be nice. If you know you're going to be building an app and it goes out in the store, let me know. I'd like to add it to the list. It's great to have that. We also have an app that's been built, that we built in-house, called the ArcGIS app for Windows Phone. That ArcGIS app has generally been a connected app that's designed to work with ArcGIS Online or Portal, to work with web maps. It also has the ability to edit and find your location, a few other things. So we've got another app out there, too, that we've been promoting thus far. We'll have a host of additional apps, and you saw Jeff Jackson this morning talk about, as the lead of the apps group, different applications that are going to be released on different platforms. Well, Windows Phone is one of those platforms. You're going to see some of these new apps like Echo get released on. What are some of the requirements for building Windows Phone on the Windows Phone SDK today? So if you're working on Windows 7, you're limited to building Windows Phone 7.1 applications, 7.1, 7.5 applications. So you need a Windows Phone SDK 7.1, and you're building in Visual Studio 2010. That's your limits. Right? You can install Visual Studio 2012. You just can't install the Phone SDK and have it work with 2012 on Windows 7. If you're working on Windows 8, you get Windows Phone SDK 8.0. You can install that with Visual Studio 2012, and that's your combination. Right? Now, Windows Phone SDK 8 allows you to target 7.1 apps. Right? So you have the ability, the flexibility there to target 7.1 or 8.0. Now, again, you're also going to need something to display the work that you've done, the application that you've built. So either an emulator, which is included with the SDK, or a device. Right? So either one of those will work. So you don't actually need a device to start development. Right? You can use the emulator baked in. How many here have actually built apps thus far for Windows Phone? Okay, a couple folks. Nice. Okay, good stuff. Are they in the store? Windows Store? In the Windows Phone store? Fantastic. Okay, did you see your app up there on that list before? No? All right, I need to find out what that is. Good stuff. Okay, good deal. So let's cover what we've done in the API thus far. So we know what we need to get started. We know it's a free download. We can get started with this, developing with it right away. What are we looking to take advantage of? Well, last June we released 3.0. This was designed to support all the ArcGIS Server 10.1 functionality and the new ArcGIS Online functionality that rolled out in the summer of last year, which included a variety of enhancements to map services such as dynamic layers, working with feature services such as the ability to track editor tracking and ownership-based editing, image services like mensuration and working with raster function infos. We added a print service and functionality and support for that. There's also an uploads task so that we could actually work with the uploads capability to put data on the server to be able to use it on the server. There's a portal API, so a public portal API that enables you to work with ArcGIS Online and a portal for ArcGIS, such as loading web maps, searching for items, and retrieving content. Identity Manager was new as well, and this allowed you to plug into some of the security systems and identity stores that both ArcGIS Server and ArcGIS Online host. Okay, January, as I mentioned before, we changed the version to fall more in line with basically the family of runtime SDKs. So we changed to 10.1.1 in January. We support Visual Studio 2012 and working with the Windows Phone 8.0 SDK. We added some other functionality here. Basically, there was a lot of sort of refinement to the API to make sure it was solid and worked well. So we had a lot of work, a lot of churn underneath the covers to make sure we had a good, robust API. But we added a few additional items here to make sure that you could work more effectively with what ArcGIS Online was promoting, as well as some of the low-level capabilities that we wanted to give you access to. So for example, the World Geocode service, we enhanced our locator task so that you could work more effectively with a single-line geocode capabilities of geocode.arcgis.com, our hosted geocode service, Global Geocoder, that ArcGIS Online provides. Provided ArcGIS Web Client, which is basically our web client that plugs into or enables you to work more effectively with ArcGIS Server and ArcGIS Online and Portal. So we do gzip compression for you. You can plug into Identity Manager and work with secure services and secure content. CSV layer and OpenStreetMap. Some additional functionality, some additional layer types that mirror what you could do in web maps. So you could add a CSV layer, OpenStreetMap. We give you the ability here to take advantage of those here through explicit layer types. Geometry 2 from JSON, we're just enhancing the ability to work with a sort of the language agnostic JSON more effectively within the API. All this is basically designed to enhance the API to support what we rolled out or functionality that we rolled out in ArcGIS Server 10.1, SP1, and ArcGIS Online and Portal. Okay, great. So what we want to be able to do now is just take a brief look at what's available, what you can get access to today so that you can start building your mapping apps. And then we're going to dive into a couple of demos here. So the first thing is we're going to take a look at what you can get with the SDK. All right, so one place you can go, let's go ahead and hit, if I go to the Resource Center, right now resources.arcgis.com hosts all the content. Really? Okay, interesting. Keep you guessing. Resources.arcgis.com hosts all of the content that you'll need to actually start getting started building your mapping application at this stage. So this is where you're going to go to download the install. This is where you're going to go to view the system requirements, and you're going to read about using the API and actually interact with the samples. So we have an interactive SDK here. This really just kind of emulates, it does emulate basically the interactive SDK that could run natively within Windows Phone, either in your emulator or on your device. Right? So this gives you an idea of how you can dive into, and I can zoom in here a little bit so we can see a little better. Of course, now I can't actually press the button, but let's do this. Let's do this. Unfortunately, we're a little bit tight. There we go. So I can see some code over here. And I can also see some code behind. I can see the XAML. I can interact with the map. Right? So it gives me this browser experience. I don't have a phone. I haven't even installed the SDK, but I can still go out and browse the interactive SDK and see some of the code and some of the functionality and the features that you're capable of building as part of your mapping application in Windows Phone. Now, where do I go? I can actually go to download this SDK as a zip here. We also just, earlier today, we just hosted this on GitHub. So if you go to GitHub and we take a look at what's out there, we can take a gander here and we can find WinPhone samples. So all the source code is on GitHub. This gives you the ability to view what we're doing, actually. So when we make changes and updates, you can see those real time. You can actually pull the zip from here. You can build it. There's a set of instructions that go along with configuring this thing to work locally. You can also do a search here as well. You can search the source code here as well. So you can actually determine, hey, where is Identity Manager used within any of the samples? And I can return those, and I can view the source easily here within my browser. Fantastic. So that's available now. Now, if I bounce this thing over, I want to show it actually on the device instead of doing an emulator. If I bounce over to the Elmo over here, let's see if this one see if this one works. All right. I don't know if that's. All right. There we go. Is that light enough? There's like a glare, actually. Okay. There we go. Hopefully that's straight. Okay. So we'll give it a run. I wonder if I can zoom in here a little bit. Oh, it's sensitive. There you go. Okay, we'll give it a run. Okay, good stuff. Okay, so I've got the Interactive SDK installed here. I'm going to go ahead and start that up. So you can see here, we saw it on the browser, see it on the phone, right? Same thing, basically. There's a couple of different samples here I want to highlight. And obviously, we have the ability to, there's a variety of different mapping samples that are available here. Now, if you're in the Silverlight session, you actually saw this before. It might not be quite so exciting, but anyone here was in the Silverlight session, actually? See a few folks in there. Okay, cool. So we have the same no data tile experience. So one issue that's come up recently is the ability to work with basemap layers that might not have data at the level of detail that you're interested in viewing. And oftentimes what happens with ArcGIS Online is you'll see this no data tile. Right? And what would be really nice is you do have data, it's just at a higher level, right? Or lower level, depending on your perspective. And you still want to be able to resample that last tile that had data in it so you can still provide your, in those areas that don't have very high resolution data, you can still get geographic context. And so one thing we can do here is that the API itself has the ability to determine whether or not, when a tile is loaded, to interrogate that tile, right? And so we can determine the size of that tile, and if the size matches the size of a no data tile, great, we can filter it out. So right now I'm not resampling, right? So I'm going to tick that thing off. As I zoom in, well, it doesn't really help me, right? I've got a bunch of blank tiles. Matter of fact, it just looks like it's white up on the screen. Not really good. I want to give me something that I can use. Fantastic. Wow, that's really bright, isn't it? That's interesting. Yeah, it is. Maybe that's going to do it. Hold on just a second, a little more. Yeah. Okay, I tell you what, we're going to flip back over here because that's not going to be visible. I tried it. Give it a run. There we go. There you go. I'll have to show it again later because I have a futures demo that has to run that. So. Yeah, go for it.
And then you should keep a lower iris, so it'll show it.
Okay, we'll give it a run here in a second. Yeah, that's good. Cool, thank you. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use the emulator. Let's close this. All right, so let's go back to that solution. Fortunately, I've got a touch screen, so I can pretend this is a phone actually on my screen, which is fantastic. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. All right, I can begin to see that I'm resampling images here, right? So if I turn off the resampling, I get nothing. I get the no data tile, not really helpful, right? So I have the ability to do this. The API offers me the ability to determine whether or not I have a no data tile. We also have, as far as other functionality that's been added here recently, we have a set of what's new here that highlights some of the functionality that was added in the last release, such as the ability to work with a CSV layer in this case, and so we can tap on a feature, we can get some information about it. Information should come back. It's not coming. We can work with a variety of different OpenStreetMap tiles. So this enables us to work with multiple tile servers and any OpenStreetMap data source that follows their schema. World Geocoding Service, right? So this is plugged into geocode.arcgis.com. Again, you can generate free geocodes, single-line geocodes from the World Geocode Service that ArcGIS Online hosts. In this case, I'm going to look for Starbucks near the center of my map. And this is in Athens, and so I can tap on one of those features. There we go. And I can see some results. Fantastic. We have the to from JSON here, which is interesting. It's interesting that's not working in that one. And so we can add in different geometries here. We can modify the JSON, right? So it just proves that that's something that's possible. In this case, we're going to use ArcGIS Web Client behind the scenes to make a request, get a list of services. We can actually show those services actually in the map right below this, and we can work with those. Fantastic. So we've got a host of different samples that are available there to show off what's new and any of the extra functionality that we've added recently. Another example here, this is something that you can download obviously from GitHub. You can take a look at it and browse it actually within the browser on resources.arcgis.com. Eventually this content is going to be on developers.arcgis.com come June. So in the June release, the next release of this product, you're going to see that content hosted on developers.arcgis.com. Okay, there's another example here, and something you heard about this morning was the ability to use OAuth as a way to leverage your enterprise, your identity store with ArcGIS Online, right? So you don't have to keep all of your identities within ArcGIS Online. You can leverage your on-premise identity store with your organization in ArcGIS Online. But what you want to be able to do when you have that enabled is you want to be able to hide credentials. You don't want to be able to broadcast your password or have your password be exposed or available for any client to see, use, store, and compromise. And so what OAuth does is it gives you the ability to host the login page on the hosting server so that the server is responsible for gathering those credentials and providing back information that then the client can use to access resources. So in this case, I have gone into ArcGIS Online. My organization, I've registered an app. And when I registered that app, I got an app ID, right, a unique app ID, which I need to provide. I also have a callback URL. In this case, it's either a mobile or a desktop app, and so I get this basically a placeholder for that callback ID. And in my app, at this stage, I have what I need to be able to make that request, but I also need to provide credentials, right? So I need to actually, when I click sign in, what I'm redirected to is this is a web browser control. This browser control is sitting in my Windows Phone app, and this is an HTML page that's hosted on ArcGIS Online, right? So the application does not have access to this. What ends up happening is I'll provide username and password. That request will be sent off and authorize my access, and will provide me with an access token, right? So the app has never seen or been able to capture the password, but it's been given a token that it can then subsequently use to request details. And I don't want to put it in here because you actually see the password. I don't have something I can give away. So what would end up happening here is I'd log in, and you'd be able to see a set of web maps. It would work well on this, but not on the emulator. And so this sample will be available shortly so that you can take advantage of OAuth 2, with ArcGIS Online if you happen to be able to want to use your identity store with your organization. So functionality is available in today's released version of the SDK. You don't necessarily have to wait until the next release. This is functionality we'll have, and we'll showcase how to build that. Okay, great. So the next thing I want to show is the mapping location and routing demo, and Jennifer is going to show us this and walk us through some of the code.
Hi everyone, is that font size good for everyone, or do I need to increase? Before I go through the code, I wanted to first show you how the application works, so let me just quickly start the application. So as you have seen at the plenary this morning, and as Rex had mentioned, the locator task has been enhanced so that we can have the single line find addresses and also reverse geocode this location. So this application would, when getting a location, for your apps to be certified, you would have to show users a prompt. It should be an opt-in experience. And what this application will do, once your a location is tracked, it will perform a buffer on that specific point so that we can widen our search extent. Okay. And over here, when I click on my search button, I can type in whatever address, probably part of the place name or the address. Like, say I want to find the nearest Starbucks in this location. And I can limit my results to a number. You can have a max results of 30 to 50, whatever your app experience, whatever you decide for your app experience. And you can choose, after reverse geocoding, your search results will have the addresses of these locations. And as I select one of these search results, it will give me directions. Search results. And as it finds a direction, I can highlight this path on my mouse down on every turn-by-turn direction, as you can see here. So now let's go to the code. So my project has reference to the client assembly, toolkit, and toolkit data sources. Toolkit data sources will give you access to GPS layer. How many of you have already used our GPS layer? Nobody at this point? Well, in order for you to enable GPS layer, you would have to go to Properties and WM App Manifest.xml and modify the capabilities to turn on location. And at that point, GPS layer inherits from a graphics layer, so you can change the renderer and symbol on that layer. And you can enable it by setting is enabled to true or false. But because your app won't be certified unless you have I can show you a link on the policies for Windows Phone, and you can search for location. And it will tell you here that what guidelines you have to conform to in order for your app to be certified, as with regards to tracking the location of your users. So you will need some sort of privacy statement that you're only going to be using their location for the purpose of your app and will not be selling their current location, etc. Also in my map, I have a few graphics layer that I'm using. The route result layer will be where I will put the results from my route task. And this layer is for, this highlight layer is whenever I tap on a turn-by-turn direction, it will show a different symbology. And I'm doing that through renderers and templates to some symbols and renderers. So each of those graphics layer, I gave a renderer. And in code, so I have a few URL here for my task. We will be using the geocode service for finding the location by searching by keyword. So that is, the code for doing that is in here. So I have a find completed event, and the method to call is find async. And for find async, you have some parameters that you can set. The search text, which was Starbucks in our case, and you give it an out spatial reference, same as your map, so that it can be projected in the same spatial reference. And you can also provide it a search extent, which was the result of our buffer. Also, to get the current location of users, you will go to the GPS layer, and a property is position. Also from GPS layer, there is a, let me go to the events. One of the layer events is geocode coordinate change. So this tells you when their location had changed. So that's the event to look for. And this is where you would want to do your next buffer. And over here, we're only using a geometry service and call. We have the event is buffer completed, and we call buffer async. And for parameters, we give the point that we want to be buffered. So after providing that position for find async, you can also give it some distance. Like if you wanted to find Starbucks in 5 miles, you can restrict the distance of that location. And you can also say how many results you want for that location. So this will return you map location, which is a graphic of map points. And you can get the addresses of this location through reverse geocode. Another event from locator task is called location to address completed. And the method to call here is location to address. And as parameter to this, you will give it a map point, which is your location in some distance. And this is how you could, as a result, it will give you the addresses. And you can update your search panel to include those addresses. So here I have a utility method for getting the address based on that address result. All I'm doing is from that graphic, I will update the attributes. Now that I have my possible destinations, after I've selected a destination and get the address of that destination, I can now call route task and find my turn-by-turn list. So if you wanted to get direction to your destination, you will be using the route task. Right here, I'm using the route task from the World Network Analysis Service, which is, they have their help page right here at route.arcgis.com, and it tells you what parameters are expected for the route task. So the method, the event to look for is solve completed, and the method to call is solve async. So for doing the route parameters, you can give it stops, and the stops will be your location, which has the address as the parameter, and your destination, which also has address as a parameter, as the attributes. And since the route task is token secured, you would need to enable your identity manager to give you access to token secured services. And the way to do that is to have identity manager current challenge method be set to have a callback of have the following signature. So you'll be expecting URL callback and some options. For simplicity, I have saved the username password under my resources app settings, but you can change it to probably have users input their username and password before you allow them access to the task. And this will generate credential, and every time it makes a request on that service, it will append the token to your service.
All right, good stuff. Hold on, let's get this thing back in there.
Right.
Let's start. There we go. Thank you. Okay, good stuff. So the last thing we're going to take a look at is some of the futures. What we're going to be doing in the future with the Windows Phone SDK. Now I'm going to show some of the demos here, and they're founded on some of the prototype work that we're doing thus far on Windows Phone to be able to take advantage of the core runtime. And so thus far, the API that we have now that's released, it's available to download today, is working in a pure managed environment. It has runtime in the name, but it doesn't actually use the core runtime that a lot of other SDKs do because the Windows Phone 7 platform didn't support it. We couldn't use native code. We can in Windows Phone 8, right? And so we're going to take full advantage of that. You basically have the same functionality you have on an Android device on a Windows Phone 8 device. And so we want to be able to take advantage of, basically, we want to be able to take advantage of core runtime, basically native logic that's shared across all of our SDKs. And this is native logic that lets us work with local resources, local data, lets us work with local capabilities, lets us work with native display capabilities. And so we want to be able to take advantage of that. So we've just started prototyping the new API. And this API is going to match basically is going to achieve parity or seek to achieve parity with our Windows Store SDK. Right? So the Windows Store SDK, the ArcGIS Runtime SDK for Windows Store apps that was released yesterday in beta. When that gets released final, you're also going to see a final release of the Windows Phone SDK, updated and built on the core runtime capabilities, so they will match. We're going to see a beta for the Windows Phone SDK probably in about a month, and that's because we're changing the guts of the Windows Phone SDK behind the scenes so that it works with core runtime. So the functionality that you still have in Windows Phone 8 development, you're still working with Silverlight, you're still working in .NET, but behind the scenes we want to enhance the capabilities so that you can leverage some of what core runtime provides, right? And so what you have today and what you'll be able to build on today, that information, that knowledge that you gain, you'll still be able to use. It's just you'll have more functionality, basically. So what I want to show is just some of the a comparison between, I'll call it the old API. The old API, which is the API we have today, which is pure managed and founded on supporting Windows Phone 7 devices. It will run on Windows Phone 8 devices. Because it's using Windows Phone 7 assemblies, it will run in Quarks mode, right? So it will run without the ability to take advantage of much of what Windows Phone 8 provides, right? I'll talk a little bit later about one of the final slides here that talks about what you should think about, actually, as far as Windows Phone development going forward. So this first example here shows the adding graphics, right? So we're going to add graphics in the current API. It's still a little flush, but. And I'm going to add in, let's say, about 200 graphics here. We can see those pop up. I can move around the map. It looks reasonably good. Let's say I'll add 2,000 more graphics. We'll wait for those to pop up. All right, map's a little less responsive. This is basically taking, we're creating graphics, we're creating it in managed code. Right? So this is all being rendered on the client, pure client, in the sense that it's all being rendered in XAML, actually, sort of XAML in .NET, so it's all managed. So they start to kind of pan around a little bit choppy, a little jittery, right? And let's say if let's add a little bit more, like 20,000. We might be here for a while, actually. We'll see what happens. All right, so we're going to see all the blue dots pop up. That's going to be the 20,000 here. We're waiting. I'm not even making a request. Actually, this is all we're just creating points in the client. There's no web connection required, no communication, no web request happening. So I can't work with the map yet. It's not really coming back. Maybe I can zoom in. No, can't touch it. Yeah, it's taking a while. Yikes. Okay. It might not be coming back. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tap this. All right. Let's go ahead and look at the new API. All right, here we go. Same concept, same demo, except now we're working with a new SDK. Right? We can still create graphics. We can still add those graphics to the map like we did before, except now we have a different rendering pipeline. Right? We can actually work with the native capabilities of the device. I can add in my 200. I can move it around. I can add in my 2,000. I can still move it around. I can zoom in. I can zoom out. I can add in 20,000. That'll show up. It takes a little bit of time. There's a pipeline there. It'll start to filter in a little bit. I can still, whoa, yeah. So I can still move around. Right? I still got a lot of functionality there. Still very responsive. right? We could have maybe another 20,000. Let's have some fun. We'll hit 40. There we go. 40. There it is. We should see a different color here, so let's see what happens. All right, nice. We get yellow. There we go. Cool. So we get, it's pretty good. You got 42,000 graphics in there. Everything's moving around pretty nicely. Looking good. Looking good. Okay, great. And the whole idea there is you're not sacrificing the ability to hit test those graphics, be able to select those graphics, be able to render those graphics. That's the take home there, is that being able to work on a common core runtime and being able to take advantage of native capabilities of the device means that you get faster rendering times. You get to work with your application more effectively, more fluidly. That's what we're looking to achieve in the next release, now that Windows Phone 8 is available. Fantastic. Now I'll show this here, but we actually have a session tomorrow on analysis, but I'm going to show it here just because I think we have a little time, actually a little extra time. So this is using a geometry engine. So another thing that we get is that in a connected environment, your engine is in the cloud, right? You have to make requests to services that are available on a remote server somewhere. So if you want to do something like some geospatial operation, like buffer, intersect, and the like, you can try and do it locally. But if you want to do it, if you want to keep the sort of geospatial integrity and generate that buffer with the appropriate integrity so that it's accurate for the area that you're working with, the study you're working with, or you want to be able to take advantage of some of those geospatial capabilities, such as intersect, overlay, and the like, you have to make a request to a remote service, right? A geometry service, let's say, for example. What we have in the new core runtime is the ability to work with a geometry engine locally, right? We also have a projection engine locally. So if you want to project, you have to make a request, send off all your geometry somewhere else, and then you get it all back in its new projection, right? New spatial reference. Same thing with any of the other geospatial operations. So if I do something like this, and this is in the old API, so what I've got here is when I tap on a point on the map, it's going to create a buffer. Hold on here. Okay, so it's going to send a web request, geometry service, right? My point, I'm going to get a buffer back. Very simple, right? So you can see I got a little time there. Pop, let's say, pop 5 of them on there. And then another thing is I can't actually change the buffer on the fly, so I'm going to have to wait until I finish dragging this before I regenerate the buffer. There it is. Okay, there's a little bit of a delay. All right, all that's web requests, hitting the pipe. Better be quick. Let's go back and hit the new API. Great, we're working with the local geometry engine, basically as part of core runtime. I can tap in some point. You can see how quickly those things are created. Right? No requests are being made. Right? I can tap points all over the place here if I want to. And then I can adjust on the fly quickly, easily. No requests are required. It's all happening on the client. Right? So just an example of some of the local capabilities that are available in the core runtime that you'll be able to take advantage of, not just in Windows Phone, but on other platforms as well, actually. So it'll be consistent across platforms. All right, good stuff. Let's do this. Okay, so we'll wrap up with a little summary. Okay, so the road ahead. What are we looking at? Well, if you're looking to get involved or get started today on developing with Windows Phone, you can use the current Windows Phone that's out there, right? The current Windows Phone SDK that's available. We're going to make some NuGet packages here shortly. So if you want to be able to integrate and start using those shortly, very easily with the NuGet Package Manager in Visual Studio 2012, fantastic. You'll be able to search, find, be able to integrate the Windows Phone libraries quickly, easily. So you'll be seeing that here shortly. As far as the new runtime SDK for Windows Phone, as I mentioned, in about a month, maybe a little over a month and a half, you're going to see a new beta, right? You're going to see the first beta of that new Windows ArcGIS runtime SDK for Windows Phone. Again, it's probably going to be paired with a runtime SDK for Windows Store release as well, right? So they're going to be lockstep together. Again, because we're leveraging capabilities that are only available in Windows Phone 8 and on Windows Phone 8 devices, we're only going to support Windows Phone 8 and the Windows Phone 8 SDK. So that's the only thing going forward. Obviously, it's parity with Windows Phone, the Windows Store SDK, and all that content, everything that we're going to be hosting is going to be available on developers.arcgis.com. So developers.arcgis.com is the landing place, like it is today for Windows Store. It will be for Windows Phone as well as every other SDK that we support. Right, so that's the place to go in the future. Good stuff. Now, there's one question that comes up frequently is, what should I use? So we're going to try and answer that one here real quick. Keep it nice and succinct. So if you need to build apps for Windows Phone 7 devices, You know, you've got an enterprise, and you've got 1,000 Windows Phone devices out there, and most of them are running Windows 7. Any of them are running Windows 7. You have to build an app that supports Windows Phone 7. You can use our SDK today. Yes. It's different. It's a different platform. It's a different type of Windows runtime, right? It's the Windows Phone runtime, actually, right? On the foundation on which it's built, right? So there's some consistency, some commonality there, but it's not the same, actually. No, it's a different platform you're targeting. Different platform target, yeah. It's like trying to build a Silverlight app or a WPF app or a Windows Phone app, right? Some of the code and some of the platform architecture may be similar, but there are nuances and differences in the platform target. And so you need to build for the specific target, actually. So one of the benefits here of actually having a Windows Store SDK is that you can build on the Windows runtime, right? You can build a .NET C# app designed for WinRT or the Windows runtime and deploy it as a Windows Store app. Part of the benefit of that, of having shared code logic amongst both SDKs, is that you have a similar development experience, right? You just have different targeted outputs, basically. So you can have a common model, a common view model, but you might have different views, basically. I mean, that's ideal. Matter of fact, tomorrow there's going to be a discussion on best practices and patterns with Windows Phone. And the first part of that is going to be a discussion on how can you build shared logic and share that logic across different platform targets, right? So behind the scenes, you could have your model and view model built and look almost exactly the same. You might have some if-def, some compiler conditionals in there to account for different platform nuances, but a vast majority of it's going to be similar, the same. And you can share that. It's just that when you build it, you have to build it for the appropriate platform, right? And so you're going to build, your output target for your project is going to be Windows Phone 8. Your output target for your project is going to be a Windows Store app, basically a Windows runtime app, basically. You do. Yep. Exactly. And so what happens is when you decide to publish, so that doesn't happen for Windows Phone, right? There's not different processor compilers that you have for Windows Phone. For Windows Store, there is, right? You're compiling for ARM, x86, and x64, basically, right? So when you build that app to make it available, and you're going to publish that to the Windows Store, you're going to make it available as an app that you can install or sideload on a device, or you're going to go through Intune and make it available for the enterprise. You have to build for all, but the Visual Studio interface gives you the ability to build for all platforms, right? You have to support those, right? Granted, it's best to support all three different environments in which the Windows Store app can function, right? Which devices, basically. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, they're different platforms. They're different platforms, but there's a similar language, right? You might think of it as a similar design language, right, in play. But they're different platforms that you're building for, right? So there's also different use cases, actually, for different platforms that you provide. So if you're building something for, let's say, cross-platform, you're building for a browser, and that needs to work cross-platform, you're going to have to build that in a language that works cross-platform, At that point, if you're building for a browser on a mobile device, you're building for a browser on a tablet or on a PC or a Mac or whatever it happens to be, a Linux box, you're building for a specific browser or different types of browsers, right? And so you need to be able to accommodate. You might be building in JavaScript and HTML, but you still have to be able to accommodate for the different form factors, different user agents, right? I mean, there's still some accommodation there for the different environments in which that code is used. That's somewhat similar here in the sense that you can actually build on .NET. Right? You can build .NET applications, and you can share a lot of that logic, but you still have to accommodate for how it's deployed and the view in which it's actually used, right? And how it's used. So it's similar, not the same, but it's similar. There's also arguments for and against native versus browser-based apps, right? So a native app tends to have a better, richer, fuller experience, immersive experience than something that you run in a browser, right? So we're talking about platforms that are designed for native app development or a native app experience, right? Silverlight gives you a native app experience in a browser, basically, right? So with this, we're still dependent on different platform targets and different platform capabilities. And those capabilities are dependent on the device capabilities, right? So Windows Phone devices and Windows 8 or devices that support Windows 8, ARM, x86, or x64 devices, if you're going to be working with native code, you're going to have to be able to compile for that specific platform, and you have to support that platform, right? And so what we're looking to do here is we're looking to take advantage of some native code capabilities, leverage that so that we can enhance the usability of the API. And as a function of that, we do have to compile for different platforms, different solution platforms. So we have to do that right at this point. But you don't have to worry about that. We handle that for you, right? You do have to build for those different platforms if you want to support them, right? But it's an option. You get to opt in if that's something you want to do. Now, ideally, if you're sticking this up in the Windows Store, you need to support all three. If you're talking about Windows Phone, there's not a choice. There's one output, basically, for Windows Phone. There's one target. The idea here is that, back to this slide, if you're actually building for Windows Phone 7 devices, we're talking about Windows Phone, the ecosystem that is Windows Phone. For Windows Phone 7 devices, and you're building a native app for Windows Phone 7, then you can use 10.11 today, and it'll work, right? It'll work on 7, it'll work on 8, actually. So our 10.11 SDK that's available today will work on 8. Because it's compiled and targets 7.1, it'll run in Quarks mode, so you're not going to be able to take advantage of the Windows Phone 8 capabilities. If you can wait, and you can, you know that the target audience for your app is going to be Windows Phone 8 devices, and you can limit it to Windows Phone 8 devices, I'd use 10.2, which is going to come in about a month and a half, right? I'd wait for that, actually, for that to come. If you have to support both, lowest common denominator, 10.11. If you can wait for Windows Phone 8, wait for 10.2, coming soon. Right? That'd be the best call. Any questions on that? Yes?
So in 10.2, all the applications for handheld devices will have client-side geometry engine and client-side
Projection. Mm-hmm. Right, correct.
So every time you download like an app on your phone, you have to download NatCon files for the projection.
You can opt into it. You don't have to cover all of them, actually. It's not everything. So it's not like, a 200 meg download. It's a limited subset. It's a limited subset. I think the idea there, too, is that there might be a way to opt into, right? So if you provide the metadata, actually, it was just necessary to do projection, there might be a way to opt into that. But it's not required to get the entire PE library, basically, and all of its metadata to make it function. So it's actually relatively smaller now than it used to be, if you're talking about some of the previous work that's gone on. So.
Somewhat off topic, but unfortunately missed the Silverlight session. Mm-hmm. How much of this will be Silverlight for 10?
Right, so Silverlight does not support native code, right? Silverlight's engine, Silverlight's runtime, actually, is in the cloud, just like Flex, just like JavaScript, right? So it's a web API, and as a web API, it relies on the engine being actually in the cloud, right? And so the functionality there, none of them support native code. In a browser, actually, you can get Flex running with native code in an Air app and all that, but in a browser, they're all limited to relying on a connected environment, relying on an engine or a runtime that sits in the cloud. And so that runtime that sits in the cloud is basically ArcGIS Server or ArcGIS Online.
So none of this will be
None of the new core runtime functionality will be actually in Silverlight, Flex, or JavaScript, actually. So the one thing you saw this morning when Ewan was speaking, he talked about there's a box that was drawn over mobile and desktop products, right? And that was the runtime APIs, right? That's true, and it's because of the capabilities of the platforms on which we're building. What was left out was Silverlight, Flex, and JavaScript, because the platform doesn't support that, right? So there's a cost benefit there, actually, as well. So if you're working with a native platform and you're building native apps for mobile or desktop, then we can take advantage of native code, work with core runtime. Yeah. Yes? Even then, we're not, so we don't, well, you could do that, actually, but it's limited. Limited access, actually, to this capability, so. Yeah. No. Nope. Yep, that's why, so Windows Phone 8, use 10.2, right? It's the only thing that's going to work. This previous slide was, see that second bullet? New ArcGIS Runtime SDK for Windows Phone, 10.2 beta release, right, coming out. Support Windows Phone 8 SDK only. So we're only supporting Windows Phone 8 at this point. Only Windows Phone 8 devices, basically. Something to keep in mind. there's a couple sessions, and I think what I was trying to do really quickly was correct that time, because I think this is actually the wrong time. Well, that's nice. There you go. So there's a couple sessions. I think this is 5:30. I think this is 5:30. I was trying to correct that slide anyway. So the end of it. There's a couple sessions that we have tomorrow. One tech session is the first session is a tech session that talks about analysis, editing, and offline applications with Windows Phone. We're going to go into some of the new capabilities, the new ArcGIS Online capabilities, some of the stuff that's in the SDK now, and being able to leverage some of the new services that ArcGIS Online is hosting, such as geo-enrichment and the analysis services that are there. Editing, we're going to go through a workflow, and Jennifer will be joining me again to walk through the editing workflows and capabilities that are there today that will be there in the next release. And then offline applications. Right now, we don't have offline support, but I'm going to show some of the work that's being done thus far to make sure that we can take advantage of what the platform provides so that you can actually view or use data offline. You can use your maps offline. So some of the stuff we saw this morning that Will demoed as far as being able to locate and route offline will be there in Windows Phone. Right? So we'll have that there too, natively. Deploying Windows Phone applications talks about working with Windows Phone Store, deploying apps to the Windows Phone Store, and also deploying apps using an Enterprise environment. So I'll be doing that one tomorrow for quick demo theater. I think it's about 30 minutes. And then the last one is the best development practices and patterns using the ArcGIS Runtime SDK for Windows Phone. And that's another demo theater. It goes for an hour. And we're going to talk about this, being able to build a modular, reusable set of code logic using MVVM and being able to change the view out so that you can use WPF for Windows Phone. And you can take advantage of sharing code behind the scenes and just having different targeted outputs actually for that. That'll be pretty key. We'll also talk about Identity Manager. Actually, there too. Identity Manager is pretty pivotal in a lot of this work and trying to make sure that you're working with secure services effectively. And so we'll be talking about that too. So we still have a few minutes. So any questions left, guys? So offline editing is the end of the year, end of this year. Yep. So yep.
As you see, you were saying January.
So I think that exactly. So at this year we know what we need to do. We know what the targets are, and we know how we get the system in place. It's just going to take until let's say 10.2.1, actually, which would be in fall of 2013.
It's for Android and iOS for all.
Core runtime. So it's being done at the core runtime level. The APIs themselves are hooking into core runtime, so we can all do it the same way, basically. So there's consistency across all runtime APIs. Yep. Same thing there for WPF, Java, Qt, Windows Store, all that stuff. Yeah. So Mac. There's another question back here, actually.
I know some of the other, with like the WPF, when it moved to the runtime, the licensing, you had to have one, an EDM subscription, and then two for the local type geometry services. You had to buy additional licensing for those. Is this following a similar model? Or?
Right. So the one thing that sets WPF and Qt and Java apart from all the other runtime SDKs is a local server. Right? And the presence of a local server required a license, basically. We don't have that for iOS, Android, Windows Phone, Windows Store, Mac, basically. So we don't have to worry about that with those platforms. Now, as far as pricing goes, there's a new pricing plan that's getting ready to roll out here shortly. I've not seen what the results are of that, but it's designed to make it more flexible and easier for developers to take advantage of these APIs, and it works off of more of a consumer market, right? So that we can actually, you pay based upon how much you consume. Right? So if you download the API, start building apps, and you don't use any of our services in ArcGIS Online or our capabilities in ArcGIS Online, then there might be no cost. It just depends on what that pricing model looks like. We're trying to make it consistent across the board. I don't know how the local server APIs are going to factor in to that pricing model, but something's going to change. Right? And so the place to go to discover that is going to be developers.arcgis.com. So eventually you're going to see some text and some information there on how this is going to change. It's supposed to affect every SDK that we have, including the web APIs too. So yeah, be looking for that. I'm looking for it. I'm looking forward to finding out actually how easy it's going to be actually to use this, which it should be easier. So any other questions, guys? Yeah.
I think you just said for the offline editing would be till the year. Is that just for Windows or is that all SDKs?
Everything, yeah. All SDKs. Yeah, so all the work that we're doing to support that at this stage is targeted for the end of the year. And that work is happening at the core runtime level, so we can share that logic across all runtime APIs. Right? So anything that's built on the runtime API can take advantage of not just offline map use, which is going to be available in June, and is starting to be available now, but the ability to edit and sync those edits actually with an enterprise system or online. So that's all building on itself, basically, but it's all built around core runtime. So.
Okay, so the map will be soon.
Yep, so offline map use, June. Offline editing, synchronization, end of the year. Yep. That's the plan at this point. So next year at the Dev Summit, you should see some demos, right? That say, hey, look, I pulled this data off, I provisioned it on my device, I have it on my microSIM maybe, plug it into my phone, start doing some edits, start making some changes. I'm going to pull it out of my phone, or maybe I'm going to connect online, and I'm going to start resyncing with some data in the cloud, or maybe I'll pull it out and stick it on my laptop, and I'll do some reconciliation and stick it back in my geodatabase that's shared with everyone. That'd be ideal, but that's about a year from now. So we'll see what happens. We'll be back again at that point in time, and hopefully we'll be showing a different set of demos, actually. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, it's good stuff. Thanks, guys. Actually, there's I believe there's, oh yeah. So this is this is interesting. Trying to get to fill out session. Session surveys actually is a little bit difficult, it seems like. So this is a nice three-step process to actually get to that place. The offering ID for this session is 235. If you get the chance to fill it out, feel free to dive in. You can go into a browser, your mobile browser, or whatever works for you actually, and enter it here. But feel free to rate the session. Let us know how we're doing. If there's any additional input that you want to provide, and we can take that there too. So, and then we can answer questions up here too if you guys are curious about anything else that's going on as well. So, but thanks for attending, guys. Thanks for being part of the Windows Phone family. So it's good stuff.